Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander Score studio. Welcome to the show. So on today's episode, I've got some cards that you need to pick up right now if, well, okay, I guess there's a couple of factors here. Number one, if you need them for your decks. Number two, I guess if you just like them in general. Number three, if you've been waiting for them to go down in price. Number four, because I said so? I don't know. Parents use that excuse all the time, right? It must work. Anyways, if you're interested in any of these cards, make sure you check out that card list link in the description below. With all that said, let's jump into the cards first that are underneath $1, even within my budget. So, first up again, cards that are less than $1. We've got a lot of spicy ones, including ones that I've been waiting for a little while now. Goodness gracious. Splice Apparatus. These types of cards have been going up in price because, well, reducing cost is crazy, crazy good. And, yeah, if you have been looking for a card like this for, say, a Spellslinger deck, a big spell deck, whatever it is, make sure you're considering this one. Proliferate deck, too. Artifact for 3 in a blue with Flash. So flash this in right before your turn. It's fantastic. Give your upkeep, put an oil counter on it. Instant sorcery spells you cast cost 1 last cast for each oil counter on it. So essentially, this one is like, you know what? Over time, I'm going to keep building up more and more and more value. Unlike some of the other cost reducers, again, this one does have flash speed, so you can just surprisingly do it right before your turn, which is great. Set yourself up for an even bigger turn next turn. And again, because that reduction is based on the number of counters on this, you can manipulate those counters with something like Proliferate to get more and more counters on it. By doing that, you reduce the cost further and can do some very explosive and crazy things. Or just, again, beginning of your upkeep, you keep getting those counters as well. So, yeah. As longer the game goes on with this in play, the more effective this becomes. Again, Spellslinger decks, giant spell decks, whatever it is, they can utilize a fantastic card like this. And again, just 91 cents right now. Moving on. A card that, when I started off playing Commander, was incredibly budget-friendly, and then all of a sudden not, and now back to pretty budget-friendly again. 92 cents, Cackling Counter, instant for 1 blue. Put a token on the battlefield that's a copy of target creature you control. Flash it back for 7 mana. This one is an incredible card for a couple of different kinds of strategies out there. I mean, first off, if you just have, well, a clones deck, a token clones deck essentially as well, yeah, that's obviously going to be good in that. There are certain commanders out there, like maybe Brutaclad, that care about actually making creature token versions of creatures, so you can take advantage of that too. There are also commanders like Kaiga that have death triggers, so yeah, take advantage of the fact that your commander or whatever legendary is legendary in the legend rule, so make an extra copy of them, getting that death trigger right away, essentially. Or, again, ETBs as well. Take advantage of those too. So this is a card that has a lot of different uses out there. Again, it's just a creature you control, so keep that in mind. It's not like, some other clone effects that might be like, yeah, steal your opponent's best creatures. But for the right deck out there, this is incredible. And again, it's a card that you can take advantage of twice, so get that early value at 3. Later on, it's still going to be worth playing for 7 for a big play. Again, 92 cents for this one. Next up, Spell Swindle at 92 cents as well. This card has absolutely demolished me. I mean, I think it was the first close quarters, actually, where, oh gosh, what was it? Worst Fears, I think I cast for 9 mana, and it was stolen. I mean, swindled. Instant for 3 blue. Counter target spell, create extra tokens for X that spell's mana value. That's a lot of treasures. So again, if you're going up against someone that essentially is playing, again, either a big spell or especially an X spell, again, mana is king in Commander in many ways, and many people out there, including myself, build decks around casting giant spells like, my Villainous Wealth deck. So if I'm casting that spell for 20 mana, all of a sudden that just turns into a massive play that turns the game entirely into the Spell Swindle player's favor. My goodness, this card can just demolish games, essentially. Even if you're just countering something for like 5 mana, to have 5 mana for free on your next turn, not free, you paid for this, but have an extra 5 mana on your next turn, including, obviously, stopping whatever spell they had, that is absolutely huge. And because they are treasures, you can keep them around. You've got other ways to use and abuse them. You've got ways to get more value out of them, like a Goldspan Dragon, etc., if you really want to go in that direction. But yeah, at a base level, this is like, okay, I'm not going to say better mana drain. I mean, it's better mana drain when it's actually pulled off. It isn't better mana drain in the fact that it costs 3 more mana. Obviously, mana drain is a broken card. That being said, the actual effect of this card is better than a mana drain because you can save that mana for whatever you need it for. So yeah, a crazy good card with some huge play potential. Next up, Hissing Miasma, a card that is very, 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 very good in the right deck. An enchantment for 3 mana in total, 1 black. Whenever a creature attacks you, its controller loses 1 life. Very simple, very effective, 93 cents right now. This kind of attack deterrent, again, it's kind of like the Ghostly Prison in black in a way, where it's like, hey, don't come at me. Don't come at me at all. If you come at me, you're losing some life. So essentially, it's a deterrent in a way where it's like, you know what? If you come at me, you're losing life for that. And I'm going to be mad at you, too. So a couple things here as well. It's kind of like, again, Revenge of the Ravens is more the newer version of this. Does cost 1 mana more, also gains you life, too. But again, stacking multiple of these effects can be fantastic. And of course, this can work very well in like a forced attack strategy as well. So make sure you're keeping that in mind. So whether you are kind of pelifording, essentially, and just sitting around, or you are aggressively causing people to attack, including having them attack yourself, that can really come impactful as well. But also, again, keep in mind, like, certain strategies are just absolutely demolished by this, like go wide strategies, token strategies that are like, oh, I've got a bunch of 1/1 soldiers, and I can't attack that player effectively because I'm going to swing at them and lose the amount of life that I'm swinging with, essentially. So make sure you keep a card like this in mind. Next up, another enchantment that is finally budget-friendly and massive for a player like me that is kind of a degenerate and loves 5-color decks. Prismatic Omen, an enchantment for 1 in a green. Lands you control every basic land type, addition to other types. This is perfect mana fixing for you. Again, every single one of your lands is every single kind of a basic land, meaning that they can tap for any color. Basically, your lands are the ultimate of alpha duels, but not like duels. It's like whatever a 5 is. Yeah, it's pentagons. Pentas. There we go, right? So essentially, being able to perfectly fix your mana for just 2 on an enchantment, which, and I've said this before, and usually it's true, enchantments are typically the sturdiest type of permanent out there. Because, I mean, creatures, again, there's most wraths deal with creatures, right? Wrath of God. Very simple, very effective way to deal with a lot of creatures. There's a lot of wraths out there that do that. Artifacts. You've got even more colors that deal with artifacts, too, than typically enchantments. When it comes to planeswalkers, anyone can swing at them, and you're in a multiplayer game, so players can swing at them. Same thing with, I mean, battle obviously is kind of weird, but anyways, enchantments typically are the hardest things to deal with, so they are going to be sturdy, stay in play, and this can usually fix your mana. And also, again, it's kind of hard for someone to dedicate a resource to take this out when there maybe is a more pressing enchantment on the board, but the amount of value this can give you throughout the game to fix your mana perfectly, again, especially for a 5-color deck out there, it's huge. And of course, keep in mind there are certain kinds of cards that work well with, you know, like, hey, having more basic land types, so keep that in mind too. Next up, Steve, Sakura Tribe Elder. This card is one that, my goodness, has gone from, you know, very budget-friendly for me to not budget-friendly at all to very budget-friendly for me to not budget-friendly at all. Again, it keeps going back and forth depending on when it's reprinted. A 1/1 Snake Shaman for 1 in a green. Sacrifice it to destroy for a base land card, put that card on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. 93 cents right now. This is a card that is basically another rampant growth, potentially even better, essentially, because it's on a creature. There are ways to use and abuse getting creatures back more easily. Also, death triggers you can take advantage of, too. It can also just be a chump blocker for you as well. It typically doesn't stay in play very long. Usually it's like, okay, turn 2, play Steve. Hi, Steve. Steve's like, hi. Things are going great. And then right before your turn starts, you're like, oh, hey, Steve. Yeah? What's that? You're gone. What? So you sacrifice and they're gone. And maybe sometimes they get a block, too, which is lovely. Next up, Golgari Charm, an instant for Golgari colors. Who knew? Choose 1. All creatures get -1/-1 until turn. Destroy target enchantment or regenerate each creature you control. 94 cents for this gem. This is a huge card. Now, the -1/-1 can definitely come in handy, all right? That's not why you're using this card, but it can definitely come in handy. Again, if you're playing against a token army with a bunch of 1/1 soldiers or whatnot, you're just like, okay, 2 mana, board wipe against you. Or again, if you're playing against like a Krenko player and their goblin army, it can be just so scary. Like, oh, they've got 100 goblins. And now they're all gone. Okay, goodbye, goblins. That being said, destroy target enchantment. That's nice again for just 2 mana with that flexibility. Regenerate creature control. That is the huge draw to this one. This is a 2 mana, save your entire team from most circumstances, essentially. And yes, again, instant speed. Choices that you have are fantastic with this card. 94 cents, a really good deal for that one. Next up, Persist, 94 cents as well. Sorcerer for 1 in a black. You'll actually see that sometimes it's just like different versions of these cards. Sometimes people just don't like the different art versions, like this one for some reason, so those tend to be a lot cheaper than the other ones. Like Decanter of Endless Waters is like a very budget-friendly card when it comes to its D&D stylized version, but the other ones are like $3, so make sure you're keeping that in mind with these. If you don't care about the art on the card, because they all do the exact same thing, make sure you consider these. 94 cents for this version. Source for 1 in a black. Return target non-ledger creature card from your grave to the battlefield, a -1/-1 counter on it. Typically, and I do say typically, yeah, most of the reanimation kind of style spells are 4 mana. Now, this one has more restrictions. Again, non-legendary creature, graveyard, -1/-1 counter on it. So a slight downside with that -1/-1 counter, although sometimes that's an upside, I guess. Sometimes, very rarely. Still, just one -1/-1 counter is usually not that big of a deal. And again, it being non-legendary, unless you're playing like legendary tribal, yeah, you're probably good. If you got a reanimation style deck with this one, or you just have a deck where you get a lot of powerful creatures and you might want to recur one every now and then, this is a very, very, very powerful undercosted effect for you. Next up, speaking of potentially undercosted, 95 cents for this gem right here. Wind Swift Slice, an instant for 2 and a green. Target creature control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Create a number of 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens equal to the amount of excess damage dealt this way. It's kind of like one of those like trample spells in a way where it's like, okay, count the excess damage. So this is a fight effect for 3 mana. Now, typically, fight effects are like 1 if it's sorcery speed, 2 if it's instant speed, for the most part, I will say. But this one does cost 3 overall. It is instant speed, so like a 1 mana extra cost for the most part. That being said, the amount of potential on this is huge because it is flexible in what you want to do with it. Again, most times you fight, you want to take out, okay, like I've got a 7/7, there's a 6/6 over there, that's the most threatening creature on the board, I can take it out and survive. With this one, though, it's like, okay, sure, I've got a 7/7, there's a 6/6 over there, I'm kind of fine with that one, though. There's like that 1/1 over there that's actually problematic with its ability. I'm going to take that one out and also make 6 elf warriors. So this can be a giant token generator for you, too. Again, out of nowhere, instant speed. This can turn entire combat around. So yeah, for a token-based strategy, for a big creature strategy, again, especially a big creature strategy where you're like, I've got a 20/20 in play. Sweet, I'm getting like 18 tokens. Great, you can really turn a game around with that. Next up, a Rixmithy Slumbering Isle, 96 cents. Again, these alternative art versions, you just got to keep those in mind because sometimes they are cheaper. A 12/12 Kraken for 4 mana in Simic. Enters the battlefield tab with 5 slumber counters on it. It has slumber counter on it. It's a land. Whenever you cast a spell, you may remove a slumber counter from it. Tap, add green, blue. This, again, Explosive Vegetation still sees a lot of play, and it's a good card. There are just now starting to be printed more and more like better versions of it, and this is kind of like a side version of Explosive Vegetation in a way. When you are playing this, it basically just becomes a land in play that can tap for 2. It's kind of like a bounce land in that way. That being said, it also has the potential to become a 12/12 massive threat for you, the biggest threat on the board. So it's like Explosive Vegetation / you get a 12/12 when you want it. That is huge. This is a crazy good card. Again, if you are in Simic and can utilize this card in a ramp package, you get a lot out of this because, again, you're in Simic. You like ramping, right? But you also probably like big creatures too. So, cool. You get both with this. And again, keep that in mind. Yeah, it takes some time to get the slumber counters off. Not that long at all. And again, it's a may. Again, when you recast a spell, you may remove a slumber counter from it. Therefore, you get it down to 1, and then you let it stay there until you want it to be off, to that last slumber counter to be off. You essentially just like save up like an instant or something like that, essentially, and your opponents have to kind of respect that. They're like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. Oh no, I was gonna swing at you, but you have a land in play that can turn into a 12/12, and you've got mana open, and if I swing at you, you're probably just gonna block and take my creature out. Even if you don't have the instant, they might still think that you do. So yeah, you can do some really fun things with this. Of course, this can survive board wipes as well, and then be like just the massive threat the next turn. It's like, player to your right casts a board wipe, wipes all the creatures out. Next turn, you're like, okay, I cast my Brainstorm. Sweet, slumber counter's gone. Cool, I attack you with my Rixmithies. Anyways, it's an amazing card. Next up, Entish Restoration, 96 cents. This one started off budget-friendly when it was first spoiled, and then quickly went outside of budget. Now it's back to budget. Highly recommend picking some of these up. It's a really good card. Instant for 2 and a green. Sacrifice a land. Go get 2 basic land cards on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. If you control a creature power 4 or greater, instead control it for 3 basic land cards on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. This is just basically a slightly different version of Harrow. Like, technically worse at a base level, but much better at a high level. So its floor is lower, its ceiling is higher, okay? Because again, it's kind of like Roiling Regrowth, but just a better Roiling Regrowth, I guess, in that way, because Roiling Regrowth is basically that first part, right? Sacrifice 1 land, 2 basics, in a play, tapped. That being said, yeah, if you get 3, which is not hard to get, again, creatures power 4 or greater. So if you have a commander with power 4 or greater, if you got a good amount of creatures in the deck, it's not that hard to meet that requirement. When you do, this is pay 3, ramp an absurd amount, and fix your mana a ton. Also incredibly good, of course, with landfall synergies as well, so make sure you're keeping that in mind. A very, very, very good card. Again, lower floor than Harrow because those lands come into play tapped versus untapped, And then also much higher ceiling, though. Again, 3 lands versus 2. Next up, speaking of lands, oh my goodness, 96 cents. Harvest Season, source for 2 and a green. Search live for the X basic land cards of X, the number of tapped creatures you control. Put those cards on battlefield tapped, then shuffle. 96 cents for this gem right here. If you have one of the following types of decks out there. A deck where you have a bunch of creatures that tap with abilities, like, say, my Garth deck. Yes, that can be absolutely incredible in that. It was not budget-friendly at the time when I built that deck. Now it is. Also, if you've got, say, a token deck that goes wide, you just swing out with a bunch of tokens. Cool. That's great as well. Also good in, like, elves, because elves have tapping and attacking as well, or just go wide strategies in general with creatures. If you got a lot of creatures that you like to swing with, congratulations. Being able to go get all those lands based on the number of tap creatures you control for just 3 mana, that is absurd. I've seen players literally get like every single land out of their deck with this, and it's again a 3 mana spell. Every single basic land, I should say, but still. You should be playing more basics if you're not playing enough. Play more. So yes, this is a crazy good effect. Again, obviously good in any of those kinds of strategies, landfall strategies as well that have creatures. Again, if you pair this with like a Zendikar's Royal, you know, like you already get a good amount of creatures and play with that. Again, whenever it landers battlefield to make a 2/2 elemental, congratulations, make a bunch of elementals. And then when you play this, you make even more elementals. Again, those landfall triggers can be absolutely absurd. Speaking of absurd, Mandate of Abaddon. Sorcery for 3 and a black at 96 cents. Choose target creature control. Draw creatures with power less than that creature's power. It's kind of the exact opposite of, I believe in white, I can't remember what the one's called, but it's, I think, 1 extra mana, 4 and a white, and it does the exact opposite. It's like, destroy all creatures bigger than it. This one's like, no. I have a deck with massive creatures, or my commander is massive itself. I want a one-sided board wipe for just 4 mana. This can be absolutely incredible. It can clear the board except for your side, essentially, or clear the board except for your commander, and then just leave you to just swing out at your opponent. So again, let's say you have a Voltron deck, or again, just a deck where you have a commander that has a good amount of power, again, like 6, 7, etc. Yeah, you can do some absolutely disgusting things with this. And if you're in, say, a Sultai deck and you've got your Ixmathes, yeah, there you go, your 12/12. Another use for Ixmathes! Absolutely amazing. Yeah, wipe out everything but that. Speaking of wiping things out, though, how about an Eldrazi? 96 cents, a 9/9 Eldrazi with a Annihilator 3 for 11. This is Pathraiser of Ulamog. Can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. This is a crazy effect. This is a crazy creature. When it comes to Annihilator, typically, again, we only see like Annihilator 1, maybe Annihilator 2. Annihilator 4 is a reserve for the Titans, essentially, right? And then this one is like, no, Annihilator 3, I'm right in between. I'm just an uncommon, don't worry about me. Can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures, so it's going to be hard for your opponents to block this 9/9. If they have to block, they're going to be getting some creatures taken out, which is lovely, but also you're going to be taking out 3 permanents at a time that you attack with this. Yeah, it costs 11, but you're in Commander, all right? If you're using this in a deck, you've got ways to either cheat it out into play, ways to reanimate it, ways to essentially, cast it because you've ramped so much. And we talked about some ways to already ramp a ton. You got ways to utilize a card like this. Next up, speed of utilization, a 96-cent card, Ashe Shelter, an instant for 1 a white. Target creature control gains protection with the color of your choice until end of turn. If it was just this, I would not be recommending this card. That being said, on the backside, there's a land, Ashe Glacier, enters battlefield tapped, taps for a white mana. Yes, this is a very, 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 very good kind of card, an MDFC land. These lands are so good because they really help ensure that you're not just like, drawing into dead cards early, or you just basically, it ensures that you curve out. You get your lands into play, right? You don't miss your land drops early on. You're like, okay, yeah, I have an inefficient land, right? You wouldn't just normally play either side of this card on its own, but combined, you have a flexible card that can either be a great land for you, or again, a fantastic way to protect a key creature, that you control, your commander, whatever it is, or just get a creature through potentially. Again, protection helps with a lot of things. Again, target removal, damage effects, and also protects with, your creatures getting blocked, essentially. So keep that in mind. Next up, Mir March. I love this spicy card. Enchantment for 5 and a red. Whenever a non-token creature is battlefield under control, flip a coin until you lose a flip. For each flip you won, create tokens to copy that creature. Those tokens gain haste. Exile them beginning the next end step. This is, yes, a slight risk, because obviously you might just keep flipping incorrectly, and you keep losing flips, and then you don't get any creatures off this. Not likely to happen. Against a 50-50 shot essentially every single time, right? So there are definitely going to be times on the other side of luck where you're like, oh, I flipped 3 coins in a row and I got 3 token copies of this creature that just entered the battlefield under my control. Fantastic. Being able to get those copies of those creatures can obviously be very helpful, yes, in combat to get some extra damage through, But even more importantly, potentially, if you've got a lot of great creatures with some great ETBs, by taking advantage of those, you can do some very spicy things. Again, basically every single time you win a coin flip, it's like, oh, get an extra ETB. So like, so let's say just like a Muldrifter, draw 2. Now instead of just being draw 2, it goes, okay, I flipped a coin. Oh, sweet, I won. Draw 2 extra cards. Flip a coin. Oh, I won again. Draw 2 more cards. It can really take advantage of ETBs. Also LTBs as well. They are exiled, not sacrificed, so keep that in mind. But if you do have a sacrifice out, that can help with death triggers too, so keep that in mind. Regardless, an incredible card. Next up, this card you've got to be careful with, okay? It depends on the playgroup. 98 cents for Natural Affinity, instant for 2 and a green. Until end of turn, all lands become 2/2 creatures that are still lands. This is a card I actually did like a full episode on a little while ago, like talking about like if this is a taboo kind of play. It's a bit of a fuzzy line. So this is a card that can be a good finisher for you. Again, like if you don't even have a board presence except for a ton of lands, you're in green, you can do that. And you're just like, oh, okay, all my opponents are tapped out, including their lands. Cool. I will turn my lands into creatures. I will swing out and take you out. Cool. That's a way to do it. You could also do them as blockers if you really need to do that too. Or actually turning your creatures into lands can be a kind of combo-y thing as well, where you're like, okay, now they untap with like cards like Vitalize, cards that untap my creatures. So you do some crazy things with that. That being said, this can also be a great board wipe deterrent. I do say that again because I said it is slightly taboo, because land destruction is a taboo in Commander. It just is. Most playgroups are not okay with mass land destruction. That being said, this is not mass land destruction. But if, say, someone else over there is going to cast a Blasphemous Act or a Wrath of God, and you're like, well, I'm in the best position, I'm going to turn every single land into a creature. Is that your fault that the lands are destroyed? Kind of. But here's what you do. You say, this is where I kind of say it's okay to do this. Before that player casts that Wrath, you're like, hey, I see you're probably going to cast a Wrath because I'm in a very commanding position. If you do that, I will play Natural Affinity, and every land will become a creature, and then you will have Wrathed all the lands. This is your fault, not mine. Even though it's basically the player's fault who casts Natural Affinity, essentially. So you're kind of holding the table hostage. Again, talk to your playgroup ahead of time before utilizing this card in that way. There's other ways to utilize it, but please talk to your playgroup ahead of time. Again, 98 cents, though, a very spicy card, and not too many effects like this actually even exist in Magic. Next up, Call to the Grave, 99 cents, enchantment for 5 mana in total, 4 and a black if I could talk. Beginning of each player's upkeep, the player sacrifices a non-zombie creature. At the beginning of the end step, no creatures in the battlefield, sacrifice Call to the Grave. This is a card that is, of course, very, very good in zombie decks because you're not sacrificing anything. Your opponents are. That being said, this is still a very good card also in aristocrat style decks because, yeah, your opponents are going to be sacrificing things, and you probably have to sacrifice things. You might just have zombies, but most likely you've got things that aren't zombies. That being said, you also have things that you actually want to sacrifice. Or just in a go-wide strategy. If you've got a bunch of 1/1 tokens, you're like, cool, yeah, I'll just sacrifice my 1/1 soldier. Don't really care too much about that. And the other opponent's like, I've got an 8/8 dragon, and that's the only creature I have, so I have to sacrifice it. This can do a lot of work for you throughout the game, taking out a ton of creatures. 99 cents, an absolute gem. Finally, though, in the cards less than $1, 99 cents Wild Clone Legion. 7 blue. For each creature target player controls, put a token on the battlefield, let's copy that creature sorcery speed. You know, we talked about earlier with Cackling Counterpart how valuable it can be to actually make a copy even of your own creature. This one can copy every single creature one player controls. It does not say opponent. One player controls. So again, let's say that player over there is the most commanding board position with the most creatures in play. You're like, cool, I'd like every single one of your creatures. So add your total essentially. And again, of course, you can take advantage of those things with like populate as well, getting even more of their creatures. You get all their ETBs, all their triggers, etc., all their power on the board. Lovely. You can also copy this and be like, okay, I'll take your creatures and your creatures or your creatures twice. Or again, you can target your own creatures and say, hey, I get copies of my own creatures. Again, if you have like a great ETB deck, whatever it is, you can take advantage of this card in a lot of different scenarios. It's a great finisher for you. An amazing card. Next up, though, let's go to some cards that are $5 or less. Again, not within my budget, but might be within yours. Some interesting cards you might want to consider. First up, Mortal Kombat! A really cool card. Enchantment for 2 black. At the beginning of your upkeep, if 20 or more creature cards are in your graveyard, you win the game. This is a very, 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 very weird win condition, and one that maybe in other formats might not be all that possible. I mean, not possible. It is possible still, but it's harder to pull off, right? Because in other formats, you got 60 cards. 17 or so of those are lands, right? I guess I haven't played Standard or anything like that in a long time. I can't remember exactly how many lands you'll have in a 60-card deck. Somewhere around there, though, maybe. I don't know. Maybe a third, 20. Anyways, so then you need to get 20 creature cards in your graveyard. That's harder to do when you've got a smaller deck. because you might mill yourself. I mean, you might mill yourself. You can still do it. Anyways, in Commander, you have an absurd amount of cards in your deck, right? You have 100. So you've got a lot of opportunities to get a lot of creature cards in your graveyard. And then even if your graveyard gets removed, which is a risk with this card, you can still get there with it too. So this card, yes, is a fair win condition in my opinion, because it's one that's like, okay, you have to wait until your upkeep to actually win with this. Typically, it means you get this on the board, you wait a full turn, and then your opponents are like, oh no, we lost, because we didn't stop you, we didn't take this out. That being said, of course, you can set yourself up where you're like, oh, okay, cool, I just have a bunch of like mill effects that I'm about to utilize right before my turn starts, mill myself, hopefully get 20 cards in my graveyard, win the game. So if you've got a self-mill strategy, a creature-based strategy, in graveyard strategy, make sure you're considering a spicy card like this one. It's for the right decks, not for every deck out there, obviously, but it's a very spicy card. Next up, another enchantment that is kind of weird, Propaganda. Enchantment for 2 and a blue. Creatures can attack you unless controller pays 2 for each creature they control is attacking you. Where does that sound familiar? Well, Ghostly Prison is basically the exact same thing, right? So typically you see this effect in white. Those kind of attack deterring, like, Pillow Fort type effects. In blue, though, we get this one, too, because Wizards, I don't know, just, decided that this was the thing way back when. That being said, it's a fantastic Pillow Fort type card. A, hey, leave me alone, swing at them instead type of card. And yeah, it's a great attack deterrent. $4.58. Next up, Crypt Gast. Yeah, did you know mono black can ramp an absurd amount? It can. 2/2 Spirit for 3 and a black with Extort, which ironically does not have the reminder text on it because it's like the old school styling, which again is cheaper than the other ones for some reason at $4.66. Doesn't have the reminder text on it, which again confuses some Commander players out there because it does have an Orzhov mana symbol in there, so it has to be in both colors. No, it doesn't, because of its reminder text, not actual text on the card. Whenever you tap a swamp for mana, add initial black. Absurd. So again, if you're in a mono black deck, you get a lot of value out of this. You play this, you're at, let's say, 4 mana. Again, you go up to basically 8 next turn, or probably 10 if you play another swamp. So have fun with that. Aggravated Assault. $4.70. This is one of those cards that combos with a ham sandwich. It doesn't even need to actually combo to be an absurdly powerful card. Enchantment for 2 and a red. Pay 3 red. Untap all creatures you control. If it's a main phase or additional combat phase, additional main phase, active as sorcery. It's always a lot of text. Instead of just, I know, I understand why it says that way, but it's like, you get an extra combat would be a lot easier to read. But yes, basically, you get extra combats when you do that. This is a repeatable effect. There are certain things out there, what's the Druid's Repository or whatever it is, that give you mana when you're attacking. Savage Vent Maw, those kinds of things, essentially. So you get mana when you're attacking, and all of a sudden, cool. Or again, because it's not untap all attacking creatures, or creatures that attacked, it's like any creature, so if you've got enough mana dorks in play, you just win as well. Potentially infinite combats, potentially infinite mana with this kind of a card. And again, at a base level, even if it's not infinite, still an absurdly powerful thing to just pay 5 mana to be able to get an extra combat. Absolutely absurd. $4.70. And again, these alternative art versions, for some reason, just always are cheaper. Not always, it depends on the version, but just make sure you're keeping these in mind. If you don't care about the art, and again, I love this art, I think it's fantastic, then cool, go for these. Next up, Virtue of Strength. Goodness gracious, these cards are powerful. Enchantment for 5 green. We've got a Sorcery Adventure for just a single green mana, though. Return target creature or land card from your grave to your hand. That's a great little recursion spell if you need it. That being said, the real key to this card is if you tap a base land for mana, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. Oh my goodness. Okay, $4.71. Again, yes, it's only basics, and some players are like, I don't like it because it's just basics. I want my things to just triple or double things up for anything. Sure, but play more basics. Play more basics. Even my 5-color decks have an absurd amount of basics in them. Play more basics. Then you don't have to care about that. If you're playing especially a mono green deck, you probably already have a bunch of force in the deck. But again, if you play enough basics, it's going to be an absurd effect. Again, tripling your mana. And again, it's flexible because it can get something back out of your graveyard that you might need. Next up, Kindred Discovery. Very simple, very effective. Yeah, this card was made for any kind of a tribal deck out there. $4.72. Enchantment for 3 blue. Enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever a creature you control the chosen type enters the battlefield or attacks, draw a card. They didn't limit this card at all. They did not say non-token on it. So anytime you make, say, elf tokens or whatever, if you're in a Simic elf deck, congratulations, you're making an absurd amount. You're drawing a ton of cards. Anytime you swing with creatures as well, again, doesn't matter if they're token or non-token, you get to draw cards. And again, it doesn't say hits a player. It's no. Just on attack. So yeah, you get an absurd amount of cards with this. Next up, kind of a spicy card that needs a reprint, Wizards, but we've never seen a reprint for this one. That being said, it does go up and down in price. $4.76 right now. If you haven't heard this one, it's quite spicy. Instant for green, and a white. Search the library for 3 creature cards. Reveal them. Shuffle your library, put those cards on top of it in any order. That's cool. That's spicy. That is, hey, you know what? I'm going to get the 3 best cards in my deck at instant speed right before my turn starts and get one into my hand next turn. And then, you know, if I got some draw effects, getting those quickly as well. Basically, go get the best creatures out of your deck. You can, of course, utilize this for, like, combo creatures, too, like a Kiki, Jiki, Zealous Conscripts type combo, or whatever it is. But, yes, this is a very spicy card. $4.76. Wizards, reprint it. Plenty of opportunities to do so. Forsaken Monument. This card is crazy good in color stacks. Outside of that, pretty much not very good. Anyways, $4.78. Ledger Artifact for 5. Colorless creature you control at +2/+2. Whenever you tap a permanent for colorless, add additional colorless. Whenever you cast a color spell, you gain 2 life. This is absurdly effective in those decks. This is just like the ultimate, like, extra mana, extra anthem, and sure, some life gain here and there too. I mean, like, no offense to life gain, but that's the weakest part of this. Being able to give your colorless creatures +2/+2 is huge. Like, even your Thopters now are 3/3s. That's massive. But yes, the biggest part of this is basically doubling up all of your mana in a colorless deck. That is absolutely absurd. Finally, Ashe Alter, $4.92 for this version of it. And yeah, again, yeah, it works the exact same as any other version essentially, and you just go like pull up the Oracle text, and there you go, it's fine. So yeah, basically pay 0, sacrifice a creature, add colorless, a great ramp effect in certain decks, a great card for Aristocrat style decks, an incredible card. So make sure you're considering, well, every kind of version of a card. But now as this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to hear from you. So what are your thoughts on my picks in this episode? Are there any cards that you notice right now that are less than $1 or less than $5 that you would like me to point out? Make sure that if you are interested in any of these cards, you check out that card list link in the description below. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.